You have almost certainly been told that a glass of red wine with dinner is practically a prescription for a healthy heart. Well, buckle up, because today we are going to absolutely shatter that comforting little myth. We're going to examine whether alcohol truly is the best friend your arteries have, or if it's actually one of the most insidious marketing tricks in the history of public health. Stick with this video right to the end, and you'll discover what genuinely happens to your heart after every single beneficial glass, and why the latest research is causing doctors worldwide to raise the alarm. By the way, do you personally believe in the health benefits of a small drink? Pop a quick yes or no in the comments now, and we'll check at the end of the video if we've managed to change your mind. To understand where this myth even came from, we need to rewind the clock back to the early 1990s. This was the era when the world first caught wind of the so-called French paradox. The premise was simple and frankly rather tempting. Just look at the French. They gorge on rich cheeses, pâtés and butter, consuming vast amounts of saturated fat, yet their rates of cardiovascular disease were significantly lower compared to, say, the Americans. Scientists and journalists scrambled to find the explanation, and the answer appeared to be staring them right in the face, or, more accurately, sitting in the wine glass. The French regularly consumed dry red wine. This was such an appealing and convenient idea that it instantly went global, spawning decades of misinformation and becoming an incredibly powerful tool for selling alcohol under the guise of health benefits. Right, let's take a proper look at this rather lovely myth, the famous French paradox. Just imagine the newspaper headlines and the television news reports back then. They screamed things like, "The secret to French health is out," or "Drink wine and keep going." It sounded like a beautiful license to indulge in a small daily vice, especially since it was supposedly doing you good. For millions, it became the perfect justification. Why on earth would you deny yourself a bit of pleasure if it was simultaneously protecting your ticker? This notion really stuck fast in the public imagination. It was beautifully simple, easy to grasp, and, crucially, it told people exactly what they desperately wanted to hear. The wine industry naturally was absolutely thrilled. Red wine sales shot right through the roof. The myth began to take on a life of its own, gathering more and more alleged proof, and very few people at the time stopped to consider that behind this rather lovely facade lay other, less obvious factors. Things like perhaps the overall Mediterranean diet, generally high levels of physical activity, or perhaps even just a fundamentally different approach to life and coping with stress. Naturally, the world of science couldn't just stand by. They immediately started actively hunting for that elusive magic ingredient in the wine that supposedly gave the French such robust health. And wouldn't you know it, they found it pretty quickly. Say hello to resveratrol. It's a powerful antioxidant found predominantly in the skin of red grapes. In the laboratory, whether they were testing cell cultures or using animal models, resveratrol was showing genuinely impressive results. It successfully fought inflammation, protected cells from damage, and even appeared to slow down the aging process. Sounds rather like the mythical elixir of youth, doesn't it? Everyone immediately jumped to the conclusion that resveratrol from wine was the silver bullet protecting our arteries. And once again, this story went absolutely global. It wasn't long before dietary supplements featuring resveratrol started hitting the market. It truly seemed like the secret was finally out. Now everyone could potentially tap into that famous French longevity simply by raising the glass of wine, or perhaps just popping a capsule. Now let's stop daydreaming and get down to brass tacks. It's time to crunch the numbers. This is where things get really interesting. Yes, resveratrol certainly has its benefits, but the crucial factor is the dosage. The positive effects scientists observed in the labs were only achieved by using incredibly high concentrations of the compound. To get that same effective dose purely from wine, a person would need to be drinking, well, hundreds if not thousands of glasses every single day. Can you picture that for a moment? Obviously, at that level of consumption, any supposed health benefit would be instantly wiped out by massive alcoholic poisoning. The amount of resveratrol found in a standard glass of red wine is utterly negligible. It simply cannot offer any significant therapeutic effect on the human body. In short, the entire theory of wine's miracle cure properties, based on resveratrol, collapses like a house of cards the moment you look at the actual figures. Alright, you might be thinking, that's all well and good about resveratrol, but what about all those studies that showed moderate drinkers actually live longer and seem healthier than total abstainers? And you would be absolutely right to bring that up. These studies certainly existed, and their findings gave us what's known as the famous J-shaped curve. Let's picture a simple chart. The line going across the bottom, the horizontal axis, shows the amount of alcohol we drink, and the line going up, the vertical axis, shows the risk of heart disease or death. The line connecting the points actually looks just like the letter J. On the far left, at the 0 point, meaning those who don't drink at all, the teetotalers, the risk is actually quite high. Then, as the dosage increases, say to 1 or 2 drinks a day, the curve dips down sharply. The risk decreases. This is what was referred to as the sweet spot, or the zone of benefit. However, past that optimum point, if the dosage increases any further, the curve immediately spikes upward. The risk of disease, and sadly death, begins to climb rapidly. This graphic representation was incredibly convincing, and for decades it stood as the primary scientific pillar supporting the theory that moderate drinking could actually be good for you. It was this famous J-shaped curve that led some medical associations to start recommending what they called acceptable or even beneficial doses of alcohol. The whole 1 glass of wine for the ladies, 2 for the chaps thing. That mantra was repeated so often, it became gospel. And of course, people happily ran with this idea. It didn't demand total abstinence. Quite the opposite, really. It seemed to encourage a culture of sensible, moderate drinking. It was convenient for everyone, for the doctors and the patients alike. It was much easier for a GP to say, stick to 1 glass, rather than opening up a massive discussion about cutting it out entirely. And the patients felt they were doing something actively good for their health, all while keeping hold of a little pleasure they were used to. So, it seemed like a perfect win-win situation, backed up by solid scientific evidence. But as we often find in science, the devil was hiding right there in the details, and for a long time, everyone chose to conveniently look the other way. Now this brings us to the crucial discovery. Why was it that in those older studies, non-drinkers seemed to have higher health risks than people who only drank moderately? A much more careful, modern analysis of that work revealed a huge systematic flaw. This is often called the abstainer bias, or more simply, the sick quitter problem. The simple fact is, the category of non-drinker, or teetotaler, in these studies included absolutely everyone who wasn't currently drinking when they were surveyed. But who exactly were these people? Well, a large number of them were individuals who had stopped drinking because they already had serious medical issues. Think about someone who had struggled with severe alcohol dependency, developed cirrhosis of the liver, or serious heart problems, and their doctor had strictly forbidden them from touching a drop. Technically, at the moment of the study, that person counted as a non-drinker, but their health was already ruined by years of heavy drinking, and these unwell abstainers were being compared against perfectly healthy, socially engaged people who might simply enjoy a glass of wine with their dinner. Let's break down the composition of this abstainers group even further. It wasn't just former heavy drinkers. It also included individuals suffering from chronic illnesses for which alcohol is strictly contraindicated, as well as those taking medications incompatible with consumption. Furthermore, the group included people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who generally experience poorer access to healthcare and lower overall quality of life. Essentially, this methodology conflated 2 wildly different populations: those who abstained strictly for ideological or healthy lifestyle reasons, and those who were forced to stop drinking precisely because they were already seriously unwell. Naturally, when compared against such an inherently sick cohort of non-drinkers, the group of moderate drinkers, many of whom had not yet developed serious complications, appeared considerably healthier. This is analogous to comparing the results of a running race between a group of professional athletes and a group of hospital inpatients. If you then concluded that moderate exercise is healthier than complete inactivity, you would be entirely ignoring the crucial fact that the second group isn't training because they are medically unable to. When scientists finally conducted new studies that corrected this critical error, the magic of that famous J-shaped curve simply vanished. They stopped comparing moderate drinkers with the entire catch-all group of teetotalers, which often included people who had stopped drinking because they were already unwell. Instead, they compared them only to those who had been lifelong abstainers and had no serious chronic illnesses. And what did the results show? They saw that there is absolutely no such thing as a benefit zone. The risk graph changed completely, transforming from that J curve into a straight line moving upwards from zero. In other words, even the smallest amounts of alcohol begin to increase health risks. The more you drink, the higher the risk climbs. Zero consumption equals the absolute minimum risk. This finding completely overturned decades of conventional wisdom, demonstrating just how flawed the previous data truly was. The myth that we had lived with for decades turned out to be built on nothing but sand, a foundation resting entirely on a statistical oversight. This has proven to be a genuine revolution in fields like cardiology and addiction medicine. In recent years, genetics has really come to the fore to assist our scientists. They've begun using sophisticated techniques known as Mendelian randomization studies. Now, that name might sound terribly complex, but the core idea is quite simple. You see, some people are genetically predisposed to being less able to process alcohol efficiently. Even a small glass of wine or beer makes them feel unwell. As a result, they'd either never touch the stuff, or they drink very, very little throughout their entire lives. Crucially, this isn't due to a specific health condition or any social pressures. It's simply the way they were born, a natural lifelong trait. These individuals make up the perfect control group of lifelong non-drinkers. By comparing their long-term health with those who don't have this specific genetic trait, scientists can observe the pure effect of alcohol. This powerful method eliminates all the usual guesswork, the so-called confounding factors like diet, lifestyle, or social background that can confuse results. And the findings from these genetic studies were absolutely unequivocal. In fact, they delivered a crushing blow to that long-held myth that a little bit of alcohol is actually beneficial for health. The research confirms that any amount of alcohol intake is clearly linked to higher blood pressure and an increased risk of developing serious cardiovascular problems. Right, let's put the numbers aside for a moment and look at what actually happens under the bonnet. What exactly does alcohol do to our heart and blood vessels? We'll start with your blood pressure. You might have noticed that after a small glass, your blood vessels dilate, you feel a pleasant warmth, and your pressure seems to drop slightly. That gives you a nice, but very misleading feeling of relaxation. But that's only the first phase of the reaction, because inevitably, the second phase follows immediately. Your body tries to compensate for the sudden drop and causes the blood vessels to go into spasm. They constrict, often much tighter than they were initially. Your poor heart then has to push blood with real force through these suddenly restricted channels. The result? Your blood pressure and pulse shoot right up. Every time you have a drink, it's essentially a massive jolt to your vascular system, a workout that pushes it way past its limit. If you do this regularly, those vessels lose their elasticity, and that elevated pressure becomes chronic. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you develop hypertension or high blood pressure, one of the biggest risk factors for heart attacks and strokes. Let's talk now about our heart rhythm. There is a well-known condition referred to as holiday heart syndrome. Now, that's not some romantic name. It's an actual, official medical diagnosis. It describes instances where people suddenly develop a heart rhythm problem, most often atrial fibrillation, or AFib, after drinking alcohol, even if they had no prior history of heart issues. So why exactly does this happen? Alcohol, and especially its breakdown product, acetaldehyde, acts as a toxin to your heart muscle cells. This includes the specialized cells responsible for conducting the heart's crucial electrical impulses. It disrupts the delicate balance of vital electrolytes like potassium and magnesium, which are absolutely crucial for the heart to function correctly. As a result, the heart's electrical system starts to misfire. The impulses become chaotic, causing the upper chambers of the heart, the atria, to contract very quickly and irregularly. This erratic rhythm is atrial fibrillation, a condition that dramatically increases your risk of forming dangerous blood clots and suffering a serious ischemic stroke. While those previous effects might be temporary, there is a far more serious and often irreversible damage that comes from regular heavy drinking. It's called alcoholic cardiomyopathy. Simply put, this is a direct toxic poisoning of the heart muscle. Ethanol and its breakdown products literally poison the heart cells, or cardiomyocytes. They damage the cell structure itself, interfering with their ability to produce energy and synthesize vital proteins. As a result, the heart's muscle fibers weaken, thin out, and begin to stretch. The heart starts to swell, enlarging until it becomes a stretched, flabby structure that simply cannot pump blood effectively anymore. This leads directly to severe heart failure. People start to suffer from acute shortness of breath, fluid retention, and crushing fatigue. In the early stages, if the person stops drinking completely, the process can sometimes be partially reversed. But in advanced severe cases, the only remaining option may tragically be a heart transplant. Now, many people assume that cholesterol is the main culprit when it comes to problems with our arteries and veins. But that, sadly, is only part of the story. Other blood fats, such as triglycerides, are just as important. And here is the key point. Alcohol is one of the biggest stimulators for the liver to start churning these out. When we consume alcohol, the liver essentially drops everything else it is doing and prioritizes breaking down the alcohol. A common byproduct of this very process is the immediate synthesis of triglycerides. This causes their levels in the bloodstream to shoot up quickly. High levels of triglycerides are a confirmed risk factor for developing atherosclerosis, that long-term condition where plaque builds up on the lining of your arteries. So when someone has a drink ostensibly for the health of the heart, they are actually accelerating the very processes that lead to blockages and serious issues. It creates a real paradox. By attempting to safeguard our vessels using one often quoted but frankly mythical method, we are actually inflicting genuine harm through an entirely separate, scientifically proven mechanism. But what about that old wives' tale, the one claiming that hard liquor, things like a shot of vodka or perhaps some brandy, somehow cleans out your arteries? It's a belief particularly common in certain parts of the world. People genuinely believe that the pure alcohol dissolves those nasty cholesterol plaques, much like it cuts through grease on a stovetop. Well, that is fundamentally wrong, and it's a very dangerous misconception. In reality, alcohol does nothing to dissolve those existing atherosclerotic plaques. What's worse, it actually damages the delicate inner lining of the blood vessels, what doctors call the endothelium. This is a microscopic layer of cells that acts as a protective shield for the entire vessel wall. The alcohol hits this layer almost like a harsh chemical solvent, causing tiny injuries and inflammation. And it is precisely these micro-damaged areas that become magnets for new cholesterol deposits, causing plaques to form at double the usual speed. In other words, by trying to clean your vessels, you are actually creating the perfect conditions for atherosclerosis to progress even more rapidly. It's the equivalent of trying to clean rust off metal using a strong acid. It won't clean it, it will just corrode it and leave it in a much worse state. But surely alcohol thins the blood, and that's a good thing, isn't it? It's true that alcohol can slightly reduce your blood's ability to clot. It does interfere a little bit with the platelets. And yes, in theory, that tiny effect might slightly lower the risk of developing a blood clot. This small, isolated fact is actually where part of the whole alcohol is healthy myth originated. However, this effect is absolutely tiny, extremely unreliable, and frankly, negligible. Crucially, any minor benefit is completely and utterly overshadowed by all the severe negative effects we've already discussed. You're talking about significantly raising your blood pressure, increasing your risk of an irregular heartbeat or arrhythmia, and causing toxic damage directly to your heart and arteries. If you are concerned about managing blood clotting, there are far safer and much more effective ways to handle it, such as taking low-dose aspirin, which is prescribed by a doctor strictly when necessary. Trying to achieve this effect simply by drinking alcohol is like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut, only you risk destroying the entire house while you're at it. The known risks involved far outweigh any potential and highly doubtful benefit. Let's widen the lens a little. Your heart and blood vessels don't exist in a vacuum, after all. Alcohol is a systemic toxin, harming every part of your body. It damages the liver, the organ that plays a crucial role in regulating our fats and cholesterol. It also assaults the pancreas, potentially leading to diabetes, and diabetes is, of course, one of the chief enemies of our blood vessels. Furthermore, it compromises the nervous system, which regulates heart function and controls the tone of our blood vessels. Crucially, alcohol is a proven carcinogen, significantly raising the risk of cancers of the mouth, larynx, esophagus, liver, bowel, and breast. To claim there is some mythical benefit for the heart, whilst ignoring this enormous, proven damage to all the other systems, is quite frankly short-sighted. We simply cannot treat one symptom while doing irreparable damage to everything else. A truly comprehensive approach to health simply leaves alcohol no place at the table. Many people delude themselves into believing they're making a healthier choice when it comes to alcohol. It's an old chestnut, isn't it? They might think a dry red wine is somehow better for them than vodka, or that a pint of beer is far more innocent than a glass of wine. But honestly, from the perspective of harm to our bodies, the difference is negligible. The main culprit, the actual enemy, is ethanol, plain old ethyl alcohol. It really doesn't matter what drink it's packaged in. 10 grams of pure alcohol in a glass of wine will inflict the exact same damage on your cardiovascular system as 10 grams of alcohol in a shot of vodka or a standard measure of beer. All that chatter about the benefits of polyphenols in wine or B vitamins in beer are purely marketing gimmicks. They are designed simply to mask the fundamental harm caused by the ethanol itself. The amount of these supposed beneficial substances is tiny, and you can easily get them in abundance from normal, everyday food, think grapes, berries, and wholemeal bread, without poisoning your body with a cellular toxin. Therefore, choosing one drink over another is simply an illusion of choice. It's not the drink that causes the damage, it's the alcohol content within it. So, what should you do if your usual way of winding down in the evening is with a little glass of wine? It's vital to remember that alcohol is truly a false friend. It doesn't actually solve your problems. It just temporarily dulls your perception of them, while simultaneously creating new ones on a physical level. Fortunately, there are plenty of healthy alternatives available for relieving stress and helping you unwind. This could be physical activity, perhaps a brisk walk outdoors, some gentle yoga, or swimming. You could explore breathing exercises and meditation, or perhaps pick up a rewarding hobby such as reading, listening to music, or maybe painting. It might be as simple as having a good chat with loved ones or indulging in a nice hot bath with some soothing oils. All these methods not only aid relaxation, but genuinely boost your overall health, especially your cardiovascular system, unlike alcohol, which systematically damages it over time. By choosing these healthier ways to relax, you are making a valuable investment in your longevity and, most importantly, in your quality of life. So, to wrap up our findings, what is the final word from the world's leading health bodies? Their conclusion is unambiguous and utterly definitive. Just last year, in 2023, the World Heart Federation published an official statement. It stated clearly, any amount of alcohol harms the health of the heart. They stress that no credible research has ever proven alcohol to be beneficial for the cardiovascular system. The World Health Organization, the WHO, also confirms that a truly safe dose of alcohol simply does not exist. For your overall health, less is always better, and ideally, the answer is 0. All those old recommendations we used to hear about moderate consumption, or a glass a day, have now been officially declared outdated and based on flawed data. Science moves on, and today, we have irrefutable proof that the supposed benefits of alcohol are exactly that, a myth. A dangerous myth that has cost, and continues to cost, millions of lives across the globe. Well now, it looks like the entire concept of the healthy glass of wine is nothing more than a rather pleasant myth, doesn't it? The newest and most extensive research suggests that yes, it is. It's a convenient and attractive idea, certainly, but sadly, it is a very dangerous one. We've already established that the French paradox can be explained in numerous other ways, that miraculous resveratrol is only found in homeopathic doses in wine, and those older studies that claim benefits were unfortunately riddled with errors. The plain truth is, any amount of alcohol is a direct route to increasing your blood pressure, causing arrhythmias, weakening the heart muscle, and damaging the walls of your blood vessels. Thank you so much for sticking with us and watching this important video right through to the end. If you found this information new and helpful, please do give us a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our future debunking of popular health myths. Now for the most important question, has watching this changed your mind at all about those supposedly safe limits of alcohol? And which other common health myth would you like us to investigate next time? Do let me know in the comments below. I make sure to read every single one.